Hey, yo, here we go. All right. Hey, everybody. So last time I did this, my chat app didn't show me the first like 5 chats that were sent. So I am trying to make sure I'm not missing anybody says for a little bit. So let me just get everything lined up so that if that does happen, I will actually see it. Howdy, howdy, howdy. Okay. So what I'm thinking I'm going to be doing today is once again rebuilding OnRamp from scratch. But this time I actually chatted with some folks to make sure that I know the steps to do it in Laravel 6. And it turns out I wasn't totally crazy for thinking I was having trouble with making it work on the last stream. There was a dependency I was working with that had not gotten tagged to be compatible with Laravel 6, so it is now. So let's take a look at that. Check one thing out real quick. Okay. So, also for anybody who watches this later, I did a test today to try out streaming earlier in the morning for me, 10 a.m. for me, which is going to be midday for people in the UK and Europe. But the problem is it means the majority of America is not sitting in a space where they're ready to watch people streaming right now. So I've been leaning more towards probably doing just after lunch. So 1 o'clock my time would likely be, so it's 10 a.m. Pacific. And then the problem with that is it's 6 p.m. in Europe. And so, in the UK and even like 8 p.m. for people in further east. So I'm not sure exactly how to handle that. Hey, I don't know where SG is. Where's SG? Hi, Andy. Thanks for joining. So I think a little bit later is going to make a little bit more sense, and I might just have to. Hey, Jason, might have to stream at a time where it's a little bit late for folks in Europe because there's no one who's. Some people might watch a stream at 6 p.m., but nobody's going to watch a stream at 7 a.m. So I think I might push them a little bit later than this. But I just wanted to try it because I had a really open morning and I didn't have a really open afternoon. So the idea for today is for this to be a place for me to point somebody to, where if they said, "Hey, I've never built," I was just actually in a pod. Oh, Singapore. Hey, welcome from Singapore. So I was just in a podcast where people said, "Hey, I'm a JavaScript developer and I've never worked in Laravel before. I did Laravel new and I was a little bit overwhelmed by all the files available to me." Hey, Vince, welcome. And so I said. I'll do a stream where if somebody's never built in the Laravel app ever before, watching the stream will kind of give you the opportunity to see what it looks like to build a Laravel app fresh. So I understand that a lot of people who follow me right now, usually on Twitch and YouTube, are Laravel developers, and I think this one will be a little bit less interesting live for y'all. And I even mentioned that on Twitter so that people didn't expect to show up today to have me build something much more advanced. Today I'm going to be building something much less advanced. But I think it'll be fun to have this as a reference point archived in YouTube for someone to say, what does it look like to build a Laravel app from scratch? So one important thing to note is that when I build Laravel apps, I always start with a tool called Lambo, but I'm not going to today. But if you want to see it, it's titanco/Lambo. And basically what it does is when you are installing a Laravel app, it runs a whole bunch of the steps that I always run when I'm installing an app for the first time. So go take a look at this and see how it works. But we're going to run it from scratch so that I'm not doing a lot of magic for somebody who hasn't done this before. So if you were to get started with Laravel for the first time, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have PHP up and running locally. So you can just run php-v in your terminal. And if you don't have this, you're going to want to use something like Valet, or if you are actually, I think use like Laravel Valet. So you can just, all these phrases I run out, you can just Google them real quick. Laravel Valet is a tool that handles your local environment for Laravel. If you are on Windows, you're probably going to use something called Laragon, I think is the main one that folks tend to use. And I think it's Vagrant, but it might be Docker, but I'm not actually sure. But basically, it's trying to get a complete development environment up and running for you locally in Windows. And then Linux folks, you can use Valet Linux or something else like that. So, so in essence, you should have PHP. And once you have PHP, you can use Git Composer, which is our dependency manager. So you go to gitcomposer.org/download, and it's going to set you up so you have Composer globally installed. And Composer is like NPM. So Composer basically is having trouble because okay, let's try this fresh. I don't know why it's doing all that weird out. There we go. Okay, cool. So Composer is our dependency manager, and so one of the things you can do with Composer is globally install tools. Jake, I just realized that this terminal that I was in there, I had just run pacvim, which is it's a tool to learn Vim better using basically Pacman style stuff. And I realized this whole output they have here probably set the terminal in some really weird mode. So if I ran Composer again after that, it didn't break, so maybe that wasn't the problem. Who knows? But I still think it probably had something to do with that. Okay, so I normally use Lambo, but I was not. So one of the things that Composer lets you do is globally install tools. And so there's something called the Laravel Installer. If you go to laravel.com/docs, the first one will be installing. And this shows you how to set up the Laravel installer. And so you just say Composer global require Laravel/installer. So if you're in a project, you're going to use commands like Composer install, Composer require, just like NPM. And just like NPM, you've got this global one. So you say Composer global require Laravel/installer. And then now you've got this thing named Laravel. And you can do stuff with it. And what I'm going to do right here is Laravel new, which is really the only thing you do with it. So Laravel new and then the command, right? So Laravel, or the name of the project. So Laravel new onramp is going to create a new folder under sites named onramp. It's going to install Laravel into it. And because I'm using Valet, one of the things that Valet makes really easy for you to do is park Valet in a specific directory. So sites is where I've parked Valet, which means any folder under sites will be served at that folder name .test on my local machine. So I now can go to onramp.test and I'm serving this site immediately as that was made from Laravel, which is from the Laravel installer, which is pretty insane. So there are a lot of files here. I won't dig into all of them, but you don't have to think about most of them. One of the comparisons I made in this podcast the other day was that with Node, you are used to building just a single file, and then you add all the other stuff. And with Laravel, it just all the other stuff shows up, but that single file still ends up being this route/web.php file. So if you go to route/web.php, this is really kind of the equivalent to the place where you start binding your routes in Node. So right here, we're at the root, and so we can work on the root. And if I were to, instead of returning view welcome, just say echo hi, then you would see the string hi right there. So all that's happening is basically here we are mapping a URL or a path to something that's going to happen. And I know that if anyone was on the stream the other day, I went over some of these things, but I want this one to be a little bit more the kind of canonical one. So this right here is an anonymous function or a closure, and everything in here gets run and returned when you visit this route. So if I were to make a new route, get ABC, and then return ABC, and then we would go /ABC, we'd then get ABC. And you can do all sorts of cool things here, like instead of ABC, it would be like route, and then whatever is in that thing right here now gets passed in here, and then now I can say return route. And so then if I go DEF, you're now going to see DEF or DEFE, right? Okay, cool. So in essence, this is where we're binding everything. So you could write your entire application in here, but for example, handling views in here would be a little bit of pain in the butt. Will you use TDD? No, I'm not going to use TDD because I'm not building functionality. I'm just building views. If anybody wants to do TDD Laravel, Treget said return hi actually works, and I think I did that in the second one, but I know y'all are in a 15-second lag. Hey, so TDD, if you want to learn TDD in Laravel, check out Adam Wethen's course on TDD. It's the absolute best tool that there absolutely is. But the thing is, TDD is useful when you're building like functionality. If you're writing PHP code, TDD is not useful when you're building out templates. So for anybody who hasn't seen what OnRamp looks like right now, it's just templates right now. It's not even yet to the point where there's anything to TDD. So we will be building functionality over time where we're actually building tooling into it. But even so, the majority of OnRamp is not going to be PHP classes that you can TDD. It's just going to be templates and interfaces. So right now, it's just basically a PHP array that spits things out onto a page. And we're not even necessarily going to get there today, I'm not sure. So there's not much to TDD. As much as I love TDD, I think TDD is brilliant. Also, just one really quick note, which has become apparent to me when talking with somebody last time. TDD and testing are not the same. Testing means you write automated tests, in the PHP world it's going to be with PHP unit, that you can run in the regular that assert that certain things happen or don't happen. Testing is wonderful. TDD is I don't know how you'd say it. It's not a subset of testing. It's a specific way to write code that involves testing, where you write the tests first, and then the tests are failing, and then you write the code that actually makes the test work. So TDD is wonderful, testing is wonderful, but neither of them are particularly relevant with what we're doing right now, which is building out an interface using Laravel's native tooling, which is already tested in the Laravel core. So one of the things we're going to do here that I do at the beginning of every site is I'm going to bring in two things. So first of all, Laravel out of the box comes with this thing that allows you to do really simple authentication, login, register, password reset, all that kind of stuff. But it uses Bootstrap as the styling for all these things, and Bootstrap is definitely not what we want to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So there's a suite of tools that allow you to bring in other presets instead of the Bootstrap-based preset. So in Laravel 6, if you haven't worked with it before, there's this new thing where you, let's see, front end preset. I think that's what they're called. That's not working. Okay. I thought it was called the front end, scaffold maybe. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So it used to come out of the box. Now you have to pull in an external package. But basically, Laravel has a series of opinions about how to set up your React or Vue code. So first of all, we're going to bring that in. But second of all, it has all those presets that I talked about earlier for the login and the register and stuff like that pages. So I'm going to use Laravel's basic setup. I'll use Vue. I love React, but I think that more of the Laravel community works with Vue, and so I'm going to start there. I think it's also going to be easier for beginners to learn Vue than React. But I'm then going to overwrite it with a third-party package made by my friend Michael Dorinda that brings in, hey, Asanux, welcome, that brings in Tailwind. And if you're not familiar with Tailwind, it's the best CSS framework in the world. And it's not even worth talking about. It's just lovely and wonderful, and you should check it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use composer require Laravel/UI to bring in this package that Laravel recently split out, that, and then we'll use it to set up our Vue presets. So I will do this right here to set up the basic Vue, Bootstrap, and JavaScript setup, and the Webpack setup, and everything like that. That you used to get out of the box in Laravel, and now you have to do these steps. And then right on top of that, I'm going to do, and I always forget the name of it, so I just Google Michael. Here you go, Michael Dorinda Tailwind preset. And so I go in and I grab this, and then I'm going to basically pull in his code right after that, and then I'm going to run it. So this might seem a little overwhelming if you've never done this before. It used to be less steps than it is now. I will be honest about that. But what I do is I just build all of these into Lambo. So while we wait for this to run, let me show you what Lambo is. Lambo is a tool that, first of all, runs a whole bunch of things that we're going to do now off the bat, for you, so you don't have to run this stuff every time. Even including things like doing your first Git commit and opening your project up in your favorite editor, opening up in your browser. I'm trying to remember, somewhere in here we say all the things that it does. yeah, it updates your environment variables, based on the name of the project you're working on, all this kind of stuff. But one of the things it does is it allows you to have an after file, and it's just a bash script that runs after you start every new project. And so in that after file, I'm basically going to put all these steps we're running right now: composer, require, Laravel/UI, all these kind of things. And I think I started doing that earlier today. Yeah. So these are all the things we're going to do. So now when I use Lambo to spin up a project, all of these things will have run every time. But again, we'll run them together manually right now. So composer, require, Laravel UI, we did. And now we're going to scaffold the view version of the UI with the authentication files. And that's doing things like it's setting up, let's see what we've got here, app.js. So bootstrap.js is the thing that sets up all your basis dependencies. And again, it's using Bootstrap. The Bootstrap name means you're bootstrapping, not that it's pulling in Bootstrap, but it is also pulling in Bootstrap. Then Axios and CSRF headers and stuff like that. And then app.js sets up your basic view Bootstrap, including registering a basic example component to show you how to load components, and then setting it up with a view instance on a div with the ID of app. If you did React, it would be similar, but not exactly the same. But then the second part of it, which is this --auth thing, binds a whole bunch of routes, which you can see here in your routes file. This is now being bound, where these ones handle login, register, password reset, and everything. And then this one says once you log in, you're going to go to a different URL, which is /home, and see a basic like welcome to the inside of our application kind of page. And then it also gives us a whole bunch of templates here. But these templates, like I said, are all in Bootstrap, which is not what I want, which is why I'm now going to go over to this preset right here. And again, I use Composer to pull this in. I'm just going to copy it straight out of there, README. And what this does is it allows us to run either PHP Artisan preset Tailwind CSS or PHP Artisan preset Tailwind CSS -auth, which is what I'm going to use, because that brings in the Tailwind preset not just for the welcome page and your dependencies, but also for those login pages, register pages, all those sorts of things, which of course is what I want. So I'm going to run that, and then finally npm install and npm run dev to actually build all of our dependencies. And if this works, then when we pull up the site right after this, it will all look good, but be in Tailwind. The window manager I use is called Divi, and I've got shortcuts. So for my most common things, so left gives me 50% left, right gives me 50% right, that kind of stuff. All right. So hopefully when this is done running, we will see this exact same page, but the styles will be a little bit different because of the Tailwind default, but we'll also see a login and a register route up here. Here we go. So this is Tailwind. And now we've got Tailwind-based basic styles for an auth system. So one of the things you want to do right off the bat is you want to set up your database so that you can actually register and log in and start using it. So I'm going to pause y'all real quick because I always forget that when I pull open my my SQL thing that you all see all the names of all my clients and their IP addresses, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to go into my editor or my in Table Plus, and I'm going to make sure that we have an empty database named onramp. We do. All right, and I will come back to y'all, and the chat will be resized incorrectly, which is an OBS bug that has not been fixed yet. All right, cool, it's back. So we have that, and so one of the things that happens out of the box, is that you have this all these configuration things that show up in your environment file. So env.example is going to be committed to your repository, and this is the thing that every single time you spin up a new one, it's going to get set in here. And then this .env file here is going to be the one that's actually running for your local. So when the Laravel installer runs, one of the first things it does is it makes a copy of .env.example, and it sets it up as your actual .env. And then anything you set in here gets passed in your application. So for example, I don't want a database named Laravel, I want a database named onramp, right? So you can change all these different things, like what's your URL, and this one's going to be onramp.test, and what's the name of your app? It's going to be onramp. And a lot of these things you always do the same way, which is why I built Lambo to do these things. So if you were to create this project with Lambo, yeah, I don't trust you out with all my clients' information. If you were to do this Lambo, it would automatically name the database onramp, set your app URL to onramp.test, set your app name to onramp, that kind of stuff. Just little conveniences. Okay, So introducing Artisan really briefly. Artisan is a command runner that we have built in Laravel, and it comes with a whole bunch of pre-made commands doing things like clearing your cache or generating files. But then you can also create your own Artisan commands that allow you to run things here. And so one thing we're going to do right now is we're going to do Artisan migrate, and that's going to go into that database that I set up. And then it's going to run all the basic migrations that come out of the box with Laravel, including a users table, passwords reset table, and a table for managing when your queued jobs fail. So now, in theory, we should be able to log in. And let's try it, see what happens. Hey, look at that. We are logged in. And like I said, that's that route, that extra route that got added right here. Oops, when you run the things twice, sometimes you get that. So we have a controller, which is home controller, and it's returning this view home right here. And so if we wanted to change that, we could go to that home view, resources, views. Let's close all this stuff down so it's a little bit less confusing. Your templates live in resources/views. So that's going to be resources/views/home, and everything's going to be in here. So you could do something like this. You are logged in, woohoo, and when you come back, you're now going to see woohoo. All right, so that's the basics of what we have going on here. So we just spun up a new Laravel app. We can edit some of its configuration to .env. All the basics of how you work in Laravel are going to live in this route/web.php file. But if you want to not just do all your code inline here, you can pass it over to controllers, and controllers organize the code that your routes are rendering. And by default, we got this one that lives in app HTTP controllers home controller. And I explained this in the last stream, but just really quickly, all of your Laravel tied code is going to live in this app file. In general, your PHP code, you do have configuration files that live in here and database files that live in here. So there are some other Laravel specific things, but the majority of the PHP code that you write that's going to interact with Laravel is going to live in this in the app folder. And all the ones that have to do with requests that come in, which is basically going to be middleware and controllers, you're going to go to app HTTP home controller. It says, I think it's a mistake that failed jobs tables migrated without the jobs table. That's not true because most people don't use the database driver for queued jobs because it's not good for production use. But regardless of what driver you're using for your queued jobs, whether it's Redis or whatever else, your failed jobs will still always be stored in the database. So that's why a create failed jobs table runs even without a jobs table. And if anybody doesn't know that, don't use the database driver in production for jobs. It's only something for use for local testing. And even so, I would just more recommend setting up Redis or something like that locally. Okay, so controllers and middleware are the two main things that handle. So basically, your routes file defines what routes are available and what happens. So every request you ever make, regardless of how it's bound here, gets run through middleware. If you're a JavaScript developer, you're familiar with the concept of middleware. And you can either serve your code here directly, and it basically, the incoming request runs, hits your middleware, works through the rest of your application, comes here, gets bound, returns the output of this, and then it gets sent back out. The response is created and then sent back out to the user. Or that same thing happens, but the place where your code is interacting with it instead gets moved into, and this syntax means the home controller at the index method. Yeah, totally happy to help, Ruslan. So what we're going to do is go look at the home controller at the index method. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit of kind of common PHP knowledge, but not a ton because there's only so much I can do. In PHP, when you instantiate a new instance of a class, the first thing that gets run is its constructor. So before you're able to call this index method on home controller, its constructor is going to run. So in theory, you could do the same thing by basically copying the code in here and putting it at the beginning of every single method. That's not functionally true because if I were to call 3 methods in a row in home controller, this would only get run once. But just so you know in general, when this thing is newed up, when you create a new one, this gets run. So what this is saying is it's specifically choosing to apply this auth middleware to here. And we normally don't do things that way. What we normally do, honestly, is we apply our middleware in here. And there's 2 ways to do that. One is you can do things like this where you say middleware. But you can also create groups around your routes and apply your middlewares there. And I like to do it that way. Although the syntax has changed about 1,000 times, And so the likelihood that I get the syntax right in my first try is basically 0. But I kind of think that this is how you do it. Middleware auth, and then you pass in a closure, and within that closure, you then put all your routes that are going to be in there. So basically, all of our authenticated routes, where you can only visit them when you're authenticated, will now live in here. I think that's going to work. Hey, Direbeck from Kyrgyzstan. I was worried that so one of the things I mentioned at the beginning of the stream is that I streamed early so that more European folks could make it. And I'll be honest that I don't know much about time zones outside of the people who ask me about time zones all the time, which is Americans and Europeans. So in terms of, I assume that the South American time zones map up pretty closely. I know Australian time zones are so far off, I'll never expect to catch them unless it's on the other way around, which is, I love when Michael Dorinda wakes up in the morning and you'll see, all of a sudden you'll see likes on all your tweets. And Russian time zones and African time zones, I have very little knowledge about as well. So, okay. So we're logged in. We have an authentication system working. We can register as a new user. We can log in as an existing user. And this is like a really pretty powerful app for having done very little actual code. So the question ends up next being, what does it look like for us to create the content of OnRamp as it exists? Now, as you can see, I brought in a template, and to find this template, I literally just Googled something like free Tailwind templates or something like that. And I just kind of looked through a whole bunch of different templates that were free, and I just picked one. So that's this. And then our designer Noemi made this logo, which I really love. And then I built the ability to put the content in here really quickly. And then I worked together with someone named Claudia, who I will show in a second, to handle the translation system. So we are not going to do all of that. I did some of that in the last stream, but I do just want to really quickly show what it looks like to get a little bit of basic content in here. And then we still have half an hour left, so we're probably going to move on to actually beginning to build out the basic structure of the databases. Nuno, thanks, man. Good to see you. John, remember the discussion about route caching last stream? Does using the group then mean this post? No. So in the last stream, one of the things I mentioned was that you can't use these closures right here to do when you're doing route caching, which is a way to speed up your route matching. You can use this closure right here. This will not get in the way of your routes being able to cache. So so really briefly, the way I got this thing right here working is I basically built a, what's the name of this project? OnRamp, it's down here. I built an array of all the content that we're storing in here. And then I basically iterated over that array. And again, I'm not going to teach you the entirety of Blade in this context, but I can at least say, let's say you had an array like this that was all of your content. What would it look like to build something that works over this array? So let's look at our home.blade.php real quick, and let's actually just set up this array so I can just really quickly show what it looks like to work with arrays like this, because this is a very, very, very common practice in PHP. So let's say learn equals this. And what you can see is it's an array of arrays. And in the PHP world, you've got two types of arrays. One of them is a normal array, and the other one is an associative array. In JavaScript, normal array is normal array, but an associative array like this in JavaScript would be an object. And you can tell it's an associative array when it's key value, key value, key value, instead of just item, item, item. So what we really have here is a normal array, which has no keys, but every entry in our normal array, which is 1 and 2, is an associative array. So this would really be an array of objects if we were in a different context. I just saw on Twitter, Tonko Mulder says, watching Matt build onramp.dev with my 2-year-old. So first of all, hi, Tonko and your 2-year-old. And second of all, I got to be honest that you have one of the coolest names I've ever heard in my life. And every time I see an interaction with you on Twitter, I just smile that I know somebody named Tonko Mulder, because it feels like you're like a secret agent or something like that. Or I don't know, I very much enjoy your name. So that's all. Okay, so if I were to be rebuilding this part right here of OnRamp, and you can see how this is the same code, right? Name is the HTML, and then HTML reference traversing media, HTML crash course. What would it look like really briefly for us to work with this in Blade? And then we're going to move into actually building new stuff. So we want to iterate over each of those. Don't tell anyone. I don't know what I'm not telling anyone. For each, learn as topic. And for each. So learn now represent, or topic now represents this associative array. And so it's going to have a key name name and a key name links. So we would say something like, so we've, we're doing an unordered list here. And then we would say something like strong topic name. And so as you can see, this is a Blade specific thing, but it seems pretty clear. For each anything that is for eachable, give me one of them. And then of the one, when you're using associative arrays, use this syntax right here, which is the braces and then the quotes, which is, I think, also in JavaScript, to access one of its properties. And then that's it. So if we were to pull this up right now, we would now see HTML and CSS, just like we have here, HTML and CSS. And then, of course, under that, we could then iterate over all of its links. And so we'd have another unordered list under there. And we would just do the same thing. And I'll share it real quick. So the one thing that's different about this is these ones, the links don't each have their own entity. The links each are keyed to the title and then valued of the URL, right? So this one would be something like UL. This is going to be, so for each topic links as name is URL. So notice up here, because it's a normal array and it's not keyed, we for eached it, and all we had to do was give it a single variable name. This represents topic. But when we're doing a for each over something where it's associative, you have to say what variable to assign this to and what variable to assign this to. So the first one as the left side, so as name, and then the arrow, just like the arrow here, and then the other side, the URL. So then I'm building my links here. So ahref equals, and then use our Blade echo syntax again, and this is going to be URL, and then close it, and then Blade echo syntax for the name of the link, and nope, I expected to end the file, forgot to close for each. Great. So obviously they're ugly and they need styles, but this is basically what this right here is doing. It's just iterating over and indenting them and all that kind of stuff. So all right. So wait a minute. T-R-E-G. Tregets, are you Tonko? Is that why I'm? That's your Twitter name. That's why. So I've been meaning to tell you all this for a long time. I think a lot of people who I know in person or on Twitter have handles in Twitch that are different from the name I'm familiar with. And so I'm interacting with someone, and then later they'll make like a casual reference on Twitter to something we talked about, and I'm like, wait a minute, and this happened in a stream where back in 2015, I wanted to learn Vue, but there weren't a lot of resources out there. There wasn't Laracast and Vuecast and Vue Mastery and all those sorts of things. And so I would just I made it up as I went, like by looking at the source and looking at the docs. And some guy showed up and was very helpful, but his name was like YUXI177444. So at one point I was like, thanks, Yuxi, whatever, and learned later that was the guy who created Vue. But because Twitch is so much more of a old school internet style thing where you just see like a little icon and a little weird name that's usually not the person's real name, it's so much more disconnected than a lot of the other mediums that I'm in. So anyway, sorry for any of you if I don't recognize your name or anything like that, and I actually know you in other contexts, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for hanging out. So anyway, Tonko, sorry for not recognizing your username. All right, so that was what it basically looks like to build out a basic app that has authentication, that has Tailwind powering everything, has this basic content that's being generated from our arrays there. And yeah, so that's what basically OnRamp is right now. The only thing that's missing, I won't go into great depth because I went into it in the last stream, is this translation system. So if you want to see how that translation system is built, check out the last stream that I did. But essentially what it ends up looking like is a learn.es.php and a learn.en.php, and then some bootstrap that happens up front that basically in a middleware type thing says, what's the first segment here in my route? Is it en or is it es? And depending on that, and then it passes to the entire app, including the views, what locale we're in right now. And so it uses both a custom thing to pick which of these files to pull from, but then Laravel also has a localization functionality. And so all your translations for all your individual like UI elements live in resources/lang. And so in here, we've got es.json, and we've also got all these en things. But don't worry about those en things right now. But we're basically using es.json to translate the English to Spanish. And if later we'd add another one, there would be then a PT or whatever Portuguese would be .json, and then that would translate the English to Portuguese or whatever. So yeah, so that's the basics of it. So I talked about this in the last one. Let me actually go pull up my horrible graphic once again. So give me just 1 second to pull it up. Let's see. I don't know if anybody else has run into this, but the new, it's not that new anymore, but the relatively new Slack icon looks way uncomfortably too much like the photos icon. So every time I want to look at the photos, I end up accidentally pulling up Slack. All right, so this is my horrible handwriting. Let me pull the scene back up and then resize the chat because that happens every dang time. Okay, this is my horrible handwriting where I was starting to think through what an individual page would look like on OnRamp. So the idea here is that there's tracks, modules, and then under each module, it would have all these things. There's skills, quizzes, challenges, and then learning resources or lessons, something like that. And the idea behind this is that you'd approach it and you'd pick your track. And your track is either going to be, I'm coming to Laravel from WordPress, I'm coming to Laravel from being a front-end developer or a full-stack JavaScript developer, or I'm a brand new programmer. And depending on which of those tracks you're in, it would define which of these modules you'd actually want to be able to learn. In terms of modules, thanks, Rich. I promise that if I take time to write stuff well, it looks better than this, but this is what just the quick rush in the, I think it was on the train or something like that, looks like, or on the plane. I was on a plane. So what we could build today is a little bit of an understanding of how these things are going to work. And even though the track is the biggest thing, I actually think of the module as the more important idea here, because really all a track is the decision of which modules you're going to see. So for example, if you're in the WordPress track, I'm going to assume that you already know HTML and CSS, so we're not going to assign you the build a website module. If you are in the full stack JavaScript track, I'm going to expect that you already understand JavaScript, so I'm not going to assign you the module about learning JavaScript. So that kind of stuff. So, but those are really just refining the modules down a little bit, and I don't think that the track is actually as important as the module, and I think the module is the most important thing. And so what we have here with modules is, I just realized, so I'm a privacy nut, and so I'm always a little nervous when I'm streaming, and I just realized that there's a thing down at the bottom of that where I was showing you all little tiny screenshots of all the pictures I've taken in the last week. So hopefully there's nothing, you can't see pictures of my kids too closely, but yeah, sorry, privacy nut. I should have known better. So anyway, hate every time I stream, there's going to be some moment where I accidentally share something or reveal something or whatever, and then I get all worried about it because, like I said, I'm a privacy nut. So anyway, so the idea for today, I think the primary thing that we can be doing is basically build out the structure of, and so let's go back to working with the real on-ramp instead of this fake one that we just created. And we'll build out the structure of the database a little bit. So we're gonna rm rf onramp. We're gonna move onramp real to onramp, and then we're gonna cd into onramp. All right, so onramp.test should now show us the right thing, but this URL doesn't work. Great. Okay, cool. So now what we have here looks like that. Jake Bathman is, no, I think I tried that, Jake. I'll try that next time. Okay. So if we were to start building this out where we actually have modules, what we're, use your max guest account for streaming. Oh, that's a really interesting idea. So that, well, yeah, but if I had done that, that would solve a lot of these problems. Although I wouldn't have had this photo available at all because I didn't pull it out of iPhotos because I'm a dork like that. But anyway, let me hold on. Let me just reset one thing for you all. Cool, great. Reset. I'm actually going to try one thing on this chat fix that Jake Bathman suggested. He said, transform this item fit to screen. We're having OBS problems with this, so. Whoop. That ain't it, unfortunately. Can I undo, reset, transform? Is that possible? Yep, let's go back. Okay, that didn't work. Okay. Stop fiddling around with OBS and just stream. All right, so here's the database structure we want to think about. So we want to have a database table called module. And what is a module going to have? It's going to have a name. That might be it. And then under a module, we're probably going to have things like, sorry, I have this reference up available to me. So I talked about quizzes, challenges, skills, and lessons. I don't think quizzes and challenges are going to happen for a while because that would require me to actually create on-ramp content right now. And right now, what I want to do is build it out such that primarily we're focused on indexing existing content. So let's say we're going to have skill, and we're going to have, I don't know what I would call, what would you call this right here? Maybe a lesson or maybe a resource? Let's call it a resource because it might be a lesson, it might be a whole bunch of lessons. So I think a skill will always be under a module, I think. So it'll have module ID. And then a resource, could a given resource be linked to multiple modules? Yes, because for example, there's going to be some times where learning about templating for WordPress developers and learning about templating for everybody else is not going to be the same. So theoretically, a resource could be linked multiple times, but I think in that context, I'd rather just have the resource linked twice rather than worrying about like a multi, many to one or one to many type situation, I think. So I think right now, I'm just going to have a resource just have a name, a URL, and just a module ID. I don't think it's even specifically targeted to a skill. I wish it could be, but like a lot of times you're going to have a resource, like a skill is going to be like, so the example I had in my Photos app was write HTML and write, you know what, hold on a second. I'm going to just pull that out of iPhoto so I can share with you all again. I would say I'm just learning, but I've been doing this for a long time. But it's been a long time since I've done it, so just, give me some grace to be an idiot here. All right, here we go. Pulling it back up for y'all. Fix the chat. Good to go. Okay, cool. So in this thing right here, we've got the skills here so we've got a module named build a website. We've got skills that are write HTML, write CSS, and bonus learn Tailwind. So then we need to add the concept of bonus there. I don't know exactly how to treat it. So let's literally just walk with my random drawings here and see if we like it. Anytime I'm doing a Boolean, I like to do is. So is bonus, which is going to be default to false. And then we've got resources. So one of the things I was saying is that it'd be nice if each resource could be tied to a skill. But I think in reality, like for example, a lot of how to build a website resources aren't going to do just HTML or just CSS. They're going to be together in one. Even finding resources that are tailored enough to just fit to a module, sometimes it's going to be difficult. So I think I'm just going to allow them to be entirely disconnected from each other. So we're going to be looking at a series of skills and a series of resources. And so in order to present the resources we have on this page right now, each of them only has a name and a URL. We are going to have to handle translations here, which is going to be really interesting. Like, do we have a module for this and then a module for this in Spanish? Or does this module have skills and resources for this and skills and resources for this in Spanish? And of course, I'd like to have other languages later. But I think I'm a little overwhelmed by solving that right now. So let's just build this as it is and then kind of solve that when we get to it. So we've got a module named build a website. We've got skills, which are write HTML and write CSS, and then learned Tailwind, which is bonus. And then we've got resources. Oh, type, right? And the type is going to be probably, if this is right, video, text, or book. I don't know if that's right. We'll have to work on those and figure out if those are the right ones, and then module ID. So then, oh, I guess is free. Is free or is paid? I'm not sure. Yeah, well, let's just make it. It's free for now. Hold on 1 second. So we're gonna have is free here, and I think that's enough for us to get this, this, and this, and then we'll skip out those two. So let's build them. Probably a feature later, it'd be good you have a table to store the link between a user. Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the biggest reasons why I want to move this into a database is so that a user can pick a track and check off the skills that they've completed and then check off the learning resources that they've consumed. And so what that will end up being is basically like a pivot between users and skills and users and resources and users and modules. There's going to be 3 probably separate pivot tables that link the users to each of those. Catching your stream by watching the video on demand at 2x. That is very interesting, and I've never imagined doing that, but that totally makes a ton of sense, especially with this where half of this is just figuring out the crap as we go. Okay, so let's go make some stuff. What's different here right now? Why is there a build local? I don't know. Okay, so okay, great. So let's make a migration. Total caveat, this is my first time working in Laravel 6, so we may run into more places where things have changed that I'm not familiar with. I used to always keep up really close and do a whole bunch of test apps with each new version of Laravel, and I just don't have time for that right now. So Matt already talks about 90 miles per hour. Yeah, sorry to anybody who's not a native English speaker. So let's do create modules table. I'm trying to remember the syntax for this. Does anybody remember the syntax for creating a migration that also has the model with it? I think it's something like that. And I even think there's like a create equals modules. There's a couple of flags that you can pass to the migration creator. One of them allows you to specify that it's a create and name the table, and then one allows you to specify that you also want the model as well. But man, it's been a while. Yeah, so it's not that. Let's see what happens if we do make migration. Does it tell us the help options? Missing name. Okay. I'm trying to remember how to get help off of a specific command. Oh well, there is a flag for it. I used to use it all the time. I can't remember it right now, and that makes me sad. So let's see if I at least got the create equals modules thing right. So create modules table. Yeah, that did work. So this is the correct flag for create equals modules. Somebody will show up, because there's a lag. Somebody will show up and tell me what it is later. All right, so we want to add the name field, make migration -h. Really? That's what it takes to create a model? Oh, you're showing me how to do it with help. Hey, yo. Oh, you know what? It's the other way around. It's make model with migration. That's what it is. Yep, see, Brandon, you caught it right when I realized it. Make model module and then -- migration. That's what it is. So let's rm database migrations create T. Okay, and then let's make model module migration. That's what we were looking for. Yep, Dyerbeck and Brandon both caught it at the same time, which was right when I figured it out, but you all were ahead of me because you're on a 15-second lag. So create modules table. Here we go. So we end up with the same thing, but we now have this module, model here as well. And the models live by default in just app. So app module. All right, so create modules table. So let's see what we want to add. We define it here. We want a name. So we're going to create a new field here. It's going to be a string field, and we're going to name it name, and that's it. So if we come in here and we run a migration, we now have a modules table, and we can create and delete and list modules. All right, so let's imagine that we were, for starters, to just convert all of these into modules. So I'm going to create a seeder. Let's see, I think there's actually a seeder that comes out of the bat just called database seeder. Yeah, so what would be really cool is if we were to basically run through learn.en.php and create the modules and resources for all entries within that file. That'd be really cool if we could do that. So let's realize that we also need to create skills and resources. We won't have skills by default when we run it from learn.en.php, but we'll have resources. So let's make those real quick too. So art make model skill -m, and then art make model resource -m. 7 more minutes. How far can we make it, folks? All right, so let's go to our skill, and create skills table. And I'm not used to having such a small screen, so table string name, table Boolean, I think is what it is bonus, default false, and the one I always struggle with. So it's going to be a big integer module ID. I think we might have to call it an unsigned big integer, actually. References ID on, I think this is the syntax for it, on modules, I think. You all will look at this and say, that's totally wrong, 15 seconds too late. Let's not migrate until we create the resources table also. So resources table is going to have some of the same things. So let's actually just steal these, create resources table. So we've got a name, we've got a URL. We've got a is free instead of is bonus. We'll actually do a default of true on that one. And then we've got a type. I don't like enums, so we're actually just going to make it a string. And then we've got module ID. So let's see how those work. Okay, well, they didn't throw errors, so that's a start. That we might have built it right. All right, so let's look through this database seeder. So the first thing we want to do is load our file, our learn controller. So I've already loaded this file elsewhere, and so we don't have to remember how to write that syntax. We just pull it in. For starters, we're just going to pull in the English version. And actually, I'm going to make this a branch because I want to push this up, and it's not going to be ready for master yet. So get create branch mes / database backed learning. Okay, cool. So then we're going to have, so let's just die and dump on learn. And so you run these things by running db seed. You can make, to know if resource is free or not, you can store the cost instead. Yeah, but the problem with that is we would have to know what the cost is. And I'm not really interested in that because the resources we're looking at are not as much books as they are things like, you know, LinkedIn Learning, formerly Lynda, costs money. Laracasts cost money, but some free ones that we can link to don't cost money. Free Code Camp is free. And so it's really more about if people are willing to pay, what are the best ones? And if people aren't willing to pay, what are the best ones? So in this particular case, I do think that there's lots of circumstances in which storing a more detailed piece of information, like storing the published at instead of is published, is often better. In this case, it's not something I ever have any interest in tracking, so we won't do it. So if you run PHP Artisan DB seed, what it does is it runs database seeder. And in here, you can call other seeders or whatever else. But right now, we're just literally, it's just going and running this. So DD is something that PHP offers that is dump and die. So it does a nicely formatted output of the thing you're working with and then quits the script at that point. So we can see what we're working with here, which is that same array shape that we were working with earlier. So what would it look like for us to make modules out of these? Well, the first thing that I would like to do is recognize the fact that these are not structured as modules right now, unfortunately. They're really structured as, these are not structured as modules. They're really just a whole bunch of resources. Oh, over here. So first thing we would have to do is recognize that out of this basic seed, this is really build a website. This is really get comfortable with the terminal or terminal and version control. And then we start getting into more modular things, local PHP environment, beginner PHP. This might be split up in a couple of modules. So now that I think of it, this actually is not as useful as I thought. So let's, instead of worrying about that file, let's just come up with a few basic things. So let's seed a couple modules. Seed a few modules. And it might feel weird to you that I'm worried about seeding these modules so early, but having a really good seeder allows everything you do going forward to be much easier to do. For example, any tests we write, we're going to want seeders. Anytime we're playing around with displaying the modules correctly in a certain place, we're going to want seeded modules. And so then we're going to go in, we're going to create our own modules, but then what happens when our database gets reset? Oh, we got to create them again. So just get ahead of it and just make your seeders. So let's say our modules will be build a website, build a basic website. I don't know if they're all going to have the same kind of imperative construction or what, because a lot of them will just be get comfortable with this, get comfortable with that. Let's just say basic terminal and version control. Sure, those are our first two modules. So then we'll do for each modules. So you can see this is, if you're not familiar with PHP, this is what the PHP syntax looks like. And so that blade syntax we were working with earlier with the @for each is really just reproducing that as module. And then we would basically seed one. So the simplest way to work with those is going to be basically say module create, and then the name is going to be module. And I will import this namespace. We'll learn all about that another time. So, hey, Uncle Paradox, unfortunately, I am just about to head off. I will finish a little bit later than 11 o'clock, but it'll just be another couple minutes, and then we're going to be cutting out. Okay, so yeah, so we import the module. So now we're basically creating a new one. We can deal with factories later. I'm not going to deal with those right now because we just don't have a ton of time. But then let's, so what we'll often do in this context is then for each module, we'll also then end up seeding. So let's actually say module equals module create, all that kind of stuff. And then we want to seed it a couple skills and then seeded a couple resources. So at this point, it's a little bit harder to actually build it out like this. I'm trying to decide between entirely using factories or building this whole modules thing out here to be a little bit more robust, so we're actually building more reasonable ones. As much as I hate to do this, I think I'm going to make them more reasonable because it's often, building robust seeders is really important, but building seeders where it's actually clear what you're looking at is often even more valuable. So as much as I hate myself for doing this, I'm actually going to do this. And then, of course, we can build seeders like a factory later. Learn HTML. And that wouldn't be learn, it would be write HTML. Write CSS. And then we can do fake URLs for now. So intro to HTML at CSS tricks or something like that. CSS at CSS tricks and superyay.com. Okay, so that's going to be enough of a structure for us to build these seeders from. Essentially, yeah, just do this. This is going to be basic terminal and version control. And this is going to be something like something like that. I don't know. I still have to think through exactly. And part of this is that I'm like having to come up with the app, the user interface, the teaching workflow, the content all at once, and it's hard to switch your brain between all of them. So this is probably a really terrible list, but whatever. That's our list for now. I remember for a while ago, Tower maybe had one, so let's just do that. And let's just presume that maybe GitLab has Git branching or something like that. Who knows? Okay, cool. So we've got enough to work for. So this module is no longer text like it was here. So first of all, we want to create it using module name. Oops. And then when we're seeing the skills, what we basically are going to say is for each of the skills, we want to insert it and we want it to be related. So there's different ways to do this, but we haven't set up any of our relationships on the model. So we're going to do it the really kind of janky, simple way. Just 1 second. I got a rug. Okay, so we're going to do it this really simple way. And so it's going to be basically just really manually creating these entries. So for each module skills as skill, then skill create, name equals skill, and then module ID equals module ID. So what we did was basically create a new entry in the skills table, and we only need to set 2 things there. One of them is the name, which is just this right here, and then one of them is relating it up to its module, which we do by saying module ID, and then we link it up to the ID of this module that we just created. So that's skills, and then we're going to do the same thing for resources. I'm trying to remember my Vim foo to say just the next 3 lines. 52, 54s / skill / resource / G. Hey, it didn't quite work though. Oh well. It only worked on the first line. I wonder why. Sure, I got something wrong. All right, find use. Okay, app resource. Okay, great. So we now basically are creating a module and then relating skills to it, relating resources to it. I do kind of think that there was some other things. What else do we need? On the skill, none of them are bonuses, so that's fine. On the resource, oh, we need URLs for all of these. That's what it is. So this is resource. It's not resource. It's really name URL. So name is going to be name. And now it's gotten long enough that I need to split it to different lines. And type. Ooh, they're not types. Yeah, definitely. That's the story of my life, where you think you succeeded and you didn't actually succeed. All right, so this is for type. I'm just going to do random. So if you're a Laravel developer, you know that what I'm doing right here is starting to reproduce what factories do. So we'll go over to factories next time, but I need to cut this one short. So I think it's array random, but if it's not, you all will tell me very soon, as you are wont to do. And then we'll just say video for text book. Lord, my typing is getting worse. There's all 3. Yeah, okay, cool. I think this is going to be enough for now. So let's run it again, db seed, and see where we get. Invalid argument supplied on skills. So skills is not a for eachable. That doesn't, for each module is a module. For each module skills. What am I doing wrong? I'm sure it's really Oh, that's what, this is the new module. So we just created, this is an eloquent object. That's why. All right, there we go. Seeded successfully. Great. So then you can do fun things like this, where you run our Tinker thing and say, give me all of the modules. Module all. You got your, right, it ran and then got interrupted, so you got 3 of those. And you can say skill all. You can say resource all. And then once we go into things like the module and say, for example, that, then you can say m equals module first. And now you can say m skills. And boom, you've got all the skills that are related. Oh, except you don't want first because that first one was the one that it broke in the middle of. Let's try last. You can't do last because we don't have a collection of all of them. Okay, m equals module all last. M skills. There you go. So we have all these relationships that are really easy to build out really quickly. So now we have our basic database connection, and we can start building out the relationships in our eloquent models, how each of them is related to each of the others, and then start filling them with more reasonable content, and then start building out user interfaces and tracks and the ability for users to check them off. And so that's what we're going to do next time. I'm going to read the chat and then be done for today. Okay. In my experience, Docker only makes sense unless. Oh no, Docker makes a ton of sense on Mac. For example, I needed to spin up. I'm trying to remember what it was. It was Beanstalk or something like that. And so my two options were either to set up a Beanstalk server on my local machine, which was fine, but I had some dependency issues or whatever. Or Jose, who works at Titan, said, "Here's a little Docker image. You just run it real quick, and then you have an instant little Docker bubble with Beanstalk running in it, and you just set your the IP address and everything like that of your of your Laravel app to point over to that for Beanstalk, and it was just up and running. So it's really nice compartmentalized things. I wouldn't run my whole thing in Docker, but individual pieces in Docker, definitely. Okay. Supernova 09, Joe Ferguson, what's up, man? Finger trouble. You probably want to use array random. Array rand will only return the index. Oh, thank you, Brandon. Yeah, I forgot about that because when you use array rand, you have to then look it up. So if you do arr rand, which is a facade, so we want to import the facade, then you actually get the key, the value. Right, for the weekend. Is eloquent model triggering? Yes, yeah, it actually triggered me because I didn't have the camel case. Hi, Alan, Matt. Mary's impressed. Hi, Mary. Hi, Dan. Comparing to Windows, not Mac. Mac still needs a Linux VM also. Oh, okay, got it. Yeah. Docker and Windows. I don't know about that one. So let's, for everyone who felt uncomfortable with the lack of camel casing, we're going to go in here and camel case this real quick, eloquent module, and then we're going to go take a look at this. And what was that for? That was for types. So if it was correct that our rand didn't do it right, then the types of one of our resources would have been bad. And look at that, type of 2, just like you pointed out. Great catch on that one. So let's migrate fresh, which deletes everything that's already in there. It's a really nice way to have a totally clean database. And then let's db seed. And array rand does not, oh, I think it was random. There we go. And then let's tinker and then resource first. And there we go, type video. Thank you so much for catching that. Yeah, Jake, thanks. I love how you all are like so much smarter than me, but you're 15 seconds behind, and so it just looks like we're actually even amounts of intelligent. Okay, so I think this is enough for us. So one of the things I like to do is finish up any of these with next steps. So let's do a new file at the root called nextsteps.md. And so I think our next steps are going to be 1, flesh out the relationships on all the models. 2, build factories. 3, add tracks. 4, allow users to have completed skills, resources, and modules. And then 5, start building the UI. I think that's what we're going to do. And someone had asked about TDD and tests. Docker runs better on Windows 10 these days than Mac OS because they're very cool. My delay's been averaging 5 to 7 seconds, not 15. That's awesome. Hyper-V. Okay, cool. Someone had asked about testing in TDD. So I think that the question for us here is going to be, what is the earliest place where we can easily add a test? And my guess is it's going to be when we start building out the methods for users to complete things. So there's probably going to be questions that we can ask the user, like has completed and is complete and stuff like that. So we'll just add in here, remember to start diving into tests here. So that's it for today. So let's do a commit. Build the foundations of a database-backed learning system. And that's it. All right. Thank you, friends, for showing up, for watching this later. Next time, we will get into these steps right here. And this is all online, github.com/titanco/onramp. And so you can see what we've been doing and see what our next steps are going to be. So we have a little bit of an agenda for next time. And until then, have a good weekend, everybody.